Within the sport and exercise science literature, the term elite might be one of the most overused and ill-defined terms. Terms such as trained, well-trained, and highly trained also appear to be highly subjective, with variations around the participant's training load, training history, and training commitment. This matters because the results of a training study published with fit university students might not apply to Olympic athletes, and vice versa. Beetroot juice, for example, consistently improves performance in recreational athletes, but does not seem to help elite athletes to the same degree. This also appears to be true when training with deliberately depleted carbohydrate levels. To help interpret the results of an exercise study, we need to know who the participants were and have a consistent way of classifying them. To help achieve this, the article published in the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance, titled Defining Training and Performance Caliber, a Participant Classification Framework, by Alannah K.A. and colleagues, put forward a detailed framework to help standardize how participants are classified in research. The framework includes 6 distinct categories based on exercise patterns and athletic ability. This presentation, brought to you by Talking Sports Science, will be a summary of Mckay and colleagues' participant classification framework. First off, Tier 0 involves sedentary individuals and unfortunately involves around 46% of the global population. Sedentary individuals might be occasionally active by walking to work or doing household activities. However, they do not achieve the World Health Organization recommendations for the minimum level of physical activity, which, for 18 to 64-year-olds, is to complete at least 150 to 300 minutes of moderate intensity activity, or between 75 and 150 minutes of vigorous intensity activity each week, as well as perform muscle strengthening activities at least twice a week. Whereas Tier 1 involves recreationally active individuals who are achieving those physical activity guidelines and may participate in multiple sports or activities, but they are not focused on training or competing in a specific sport. It is estimated that this category applies to approximately 35 to 42% of the global population. Moving on to Tier 2, trained/developmental. Individuals in this category identify with a certain sport and are differentiated from Tier 1 because they are committed to sport-specific training by regularly training 3 or more times per week with the intention to compete in local level competitions. However, there is no performance criteria or skill level required to reach this classification. Tier 2 is estimated to include around 12 to 19% of the global population. When moving from Tier 2 to Tier 3, there's a huge drop-off as not many people meet the requirements of being highly trained, with only around 0.014% of the global population being considered highly trained. Athletes within this classification includes individuals performing in provincial, state or academy programs, where they are completing structured and periodized training and are developing proficiency in the skills required to perform their sport at the highest level. For sports measured in time or distance, individuals are typically within about 20% of the top performance in the world. And Tier 4, elite/international level athletes, represent only 0.0025% of the global population and are likely training as hard as anyone in their sport trains, and so it's no surprise that they are highly proficient in the skills required to perform. Athletes in this classification might be an NCAA Division I athlete or a member of their national team, and depending on the depth within their sport, are probably ranked somewhere between 4th and 300th in the world in their sporting event, and within approximately 7% of the top performance in the world. Also, the majority of athletes at this level are part of a drug testing program. And last but not least, Tier 5, World Class, is a classification reserved for athletes who possess exceptional skill within their sport, and so are considered the cream of the crop and make up less than 0.00006% of the global population. This includes athletes who are Olympic medalists or at least a finalist, are within 2% of the world record or yearly top performance, top players within top teams, or athletes achieving individual accolades, i.e. Player of the Year. And that completes the 6 categories. When combined, individuals in Tier 3 to 5 make up less than a fraction of a percent of the global population, making them an exceptionally rare group. But making these distinctions are important. This is because as individuals progress through the tiers and their training volume increases and they get closer to their peak adaptive and genetic potential, it makes them less likely to experience any meaningful improvement from study interventions. For this reason, the difference between a good university athlete and an Olympic medalist is substantial. It should be noted that individuals are not required to meet all aspects of each tier to be classified. Rather, the information discussed can be used in conjunction with a flowchart, which starts with first determining the individual's average weekly training volume. For example, training days, sessions, distance and hours. If it is less than 150 minutes per week, then they are classified as Tier 0, sedentary. Whereas, if they are engaged in more than 150 minutes per week, but do not identify with a specific sport and are not competitive, then they can be classified as Tier 1, recreationally active. If they do, then the individual can be classified in Tier 2, train/developmental. Going back to the individual's average weekly training volume, if the individual undertakes maximal or near maximal training volume for their sport, but does not reach performance standards to compete nationally, the individual can be classified in Tier 2, train/developmental. However, if they do, it needs to be asked, does the athlete compete internationally, and is the athlete globally ranked within the top 4 to 300 athletes in their sport? If not, the individual can be classified in Tier 3, involving highly trained/national level athletes. If yes, it needs to be asked, is the athlete an international medalist at a major global championship? And can the athlete perform to within approximately 2% of the world record and or current yearly world leading performance? If not, the individual can be classified in Tier 4, elite/international level athletes. If yes, they are the cream of the crop, Tier 5, world-class athletes. And that completes the flowchart to help with classification. However, there are of course several nuances, with the main one being how popular the sport is. This is especially true when distinguishing between the top tiers. For example, when comparing track and field and freestyle snowboarding, in freestyle snowboarding, it's suggested that you need to be a medalist at a major international event to be in Tier 5, world class, while making the final 8 would put you in Tier 4, whereas in track and field, because the competition is much deeper, making the final, which means placing in the top 8 to 15 at a major international competition, would put you in Tier 5, world class. And that concludes this presentation. If you are keen to delve deeper into the nuances surrounding participant classification and how the framework can be adapted to fit the sport in question, I recommend you go and check out the full article. The link is in the description. Thanks for listening, folks. See you next time.